chapter 1, 26 to 38, and Ephesians 1 to 11. Isn't it amazing that all of us, at one point or another, have the desire to make sense of life? Hey? We want it to not be random. We want to make sense of our life. And everything needs to make sense in our life. So that I can look back at my life and see those things in my life. And the tree here represents our life. Okay? And as I look back, I want to be able to see that what happens to me, I know where it comes from, and I know what I can say about it. And I can look back in my life and say, why everything makes sense in my life. And this is all of us. All of us want to make sense of our life, isn't it? It's not a religious thing at all. We just want to make sense of it. And we want to be able to look at it and say, I love it when a plan comes together. Isn't it? And as we look at our life, and you can see on this tree, there are a few sort of decorations. But as we look at our life, we see that, yeah, we were thinking and praying and wishing for marriage, and it happened. And some of us have been married for a long time. Some of us have been married for a short time. And we say, okay, well, you know, that's great. We wanted children, and they are the children. And you know, some of us have lots of children. Some of us have a few children. And we look at it and we say, okay, well, you know, that I'm happy with that. We wanted a job, and we got a job, and maybe it's not quite the job that we wanted, but we have a job, and we're earning an income, and it's doing what it's supposed to do, and I'm able to buy the things that I wanted to buy. What about a house? Well, we wanted a house, whether we're renting a house or whether we actually own a house, but there's a roof over our head, and it's okay. Everything, every time, just comes together, okay? And we look at it and we experience it, and everything just fits, isn't it? We sort of said, well, it's good to have these things in my life. Everything happens for a reason when we look at these things. And we might say, well, you know, in fact, this is common in many, many different cultures and countries, and that we actually developed a terminology for those kind of things. You know, some people say, well, I don't believe in coincidences. You see, you just have to meet the right person, and you haven't met the right person, so maybe that's why you're not married. Or when things don't happen, maybe you say, well, it wasn't meant to be. Okay, we use those terminologies to sort of try and explain why life hasn't quite happened for us and why it doesn't quite look like that. But where these things really come into play is when someone hits a bump. And someone hits a bump in their lives, like a big tragedy that happens. And it's when we ask those questions, why? Why me? Have you asked that question? Why me? Why did it have to happen? Why did it happen to me or her? Why did God allow it to happen? And when those things happen, there is something in us that wants us to sort of like, where in the world am I going to put this? What am I going to do with this? I mean, you know, yes, you dreamt about a marriage and you got married, but all of a sudden something happened, and all of a sudden you get divorced. Now, where do you put this? You didn't plan for it. No one plans for it. But it happens, doesn't it? And you have to deal with it. And you feel all the rejection, and in some cases you feel people pointing fingers at you and so on. But where do I hang this? It wasn't a part of the plan. But here it is. It's right there. And you deal with it. And you carry on with life. And yes, he did have a job, but you know, with the economy the way it is, and you know, there's no money enough in the country, and all of a sudden that great job was just taken away from you, and now you find yourself jobless. What do you do? Where do you hang this? How do you deal with the fact that you don't have a job now? What do you do with it? And it's there. And once again, you have to just learn how to deal with it. How can that happen to me is a question that you ask. I mean, I have degrees, I've studied. They said that I was safe, and all of a sudden you got called into the office and say, well, you know, there's not enough money, and so we need to let you go. We need to retrench you. When you watch someone in pain and say to them, well, that's life, but when you see someone you love and you find yourself in a purpose kind of life, and say, well, I know it looks random, but maybe one day, hopefully, eventually, just give it some time, you say to them. There are plenty of fish in the sea. There's other things that you might say. Because it's in each of us to try and find the purpose and see that it fits together and that the plan does come together, doesn't it? Here's an interesting question. Why is that? What's wrong with us? You see, I have those questions that go through my mind and ask, well, why those things happen to good people? You see, Christians have an answer for that. Christians believe that everyone was made in the image of God, and that God is powerful and purposeful. He is a purposeful God, and that He is involved in our story. And God brings order out of chaos, and that He brings those things that maybe just don't fit in my life, He just brings them together and He makes sense of those things, doesn't He? And in some of us, it is so deep that it's probably sort of bumps our faith and causes us to doubt and think. But at one point in our life, there was this nagging sense saying, it's not enough, isn't it? It's not enough, because that is not the purpose of my life, because I am created in the image of God. Because He is a God of purpose and order that connects things that you don't understand and will make them come together. You see, all of this collides with the Christmas story. And you might have had also in your thing, it was not planned, and you were not feeling that great, and you decided finally to go to the doctor. Maybe your spouse has been nagging you to go and have it checked out. And all your fears are realized, and you've been told that you got this sickness, and that you've got few options, but there is no guarantee. And once again you think, well, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to deal with it? Is it a part of my life? Was I planning for it? And just to top it all off, with everything that's around you, all of a sudden you realize that you just don't have enough to make it every month. What you used to have and the lifestyle you used to live is not that lifestyle anymore, and the finances begin to dwindle. And once again you ask, well, is there space in my life for this? Was I planning for it? But there it is, it's staring you in the face, and whether you like it or not, you have to make changes. But you see, all of this collides with the Christmas story, because it is the perfect example of God deeping down into the seemingly randomness of life, the chaos of life, the insignificance of life, and reminding the world that there is a plan, there is a design, that His story goes forward, that God is a God of His story, and the Christmas story is a picture of God coming down and being involved with us. And He does it in such a way that it becomes apparent that there is a God who knows where we are, that there is a God who cares about where we are. So what I'd like to do is read a portion of the Christmas story and come back to this idea and talk about how all of this connects with each of our lives. So I want us to read from Luke chapter 1, verse 1 to 4. Now, before you get there, just a little bit of background on who Luke was. Luke was a very educated guy, okay? He was always referred to as a doctor, not necessarily a medical doctor, but in those days, someone who had knowledge of many things like literature and history and geography and languages and so on was regarded as a doctor. Yes, he did have some medical background, but he wasn't just a doctor in medicine. So when Luke writes the Gospel of Luke, he's very pedantic about the details that he gives in his account of the story of Jesus. And you can see in Luke chapter 1 to 4, it says, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us. In other words, he's talking about Matthew and Mark and John. They've written those things down. They couldn't remember it anymore, so they were writing it down. Many have done that, just as they were handed down to us by those who first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated, you see, this is very typical of Luke, I carefully investigated, I didn't just write it down, I went and actually looked at it and investigated. And he says, investigated everything from the beginning, I too decide to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know that certainty, without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, that you will know the certainty of the things that you have been taught. That does not sound like once upon a time in the city of Bethlehem kind of story, is it? Okay? It doesn't sound like long time ago in a galaxy far away. It doesn't. It doesn't even sound like a religious kind of talk. It's a guy who says, I've investigated it, I talked to eyewitnesses about it, and I want to make sure that someone writes an orderly account that future generations will know what happened in our midst. Now, that's the way Luke does it. And I bet some of you didn't even know it was in the Bible. Well, you should read the Bible more often, and you will find the things that are in the Bible. I want us now to move to Luke chapter 1, verse 26. And let's have a look at this verse. Luke chapter 1, verse 26. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent an angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. Now look at the next phrase. Imagine the response to the next words, okay? The virgin name was Mary. Now Luke had no idea of what will happen in the future as he was writing the story. Okay? Luke had no idea that cathedrals will be built, okay? That wars will be fought, that buildings all over the world will be built, that missionaries will be sent out, books will be written, heretics will be burnt, people will give up their lives in order to get the story out into the 1st century. Luke had no idea. You see, Luke just wanted to make sure he gets the story out to the next generation. Now, what do we know about Mary? She was a teenage girl. Okay? She was a teenage girl. Her life was mapped out for her. Okay? I mean, she was going to get married. Okay? Marriage was a part of those things that she had planned. She was going to get married to a nice guy that she probably never met him, because that's the way it was in those days. It was arranged. And her and this man Joseph will live probably in a parent's house, so there will be a house, and they will live there for a while. And she was going to have some kids. And Joseph was going to have a job. Everything was planned. Everything was there in her life and what she was looking for. But God, in this period of history, decided to tell us that He is a God who is involved. And what may seem random to us is purposeful in the mind of God. And that's why we seek purpose in life. You see, the angel went to her and said, "Greeting, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this may be. You see, in other words, you are the good witch or the bad witch. Okay, because it wasn't a common thing for angels to obviously come up. I've never seen an angel. Are you the Lord? Imagine how overwhelming this must have been to her of seeing this angel coming to her in the middle of the night. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You are highly favored, and you have found favor with God. You will conceive." Look how certain this is in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the randomness in her life. It says, "You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will call him Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob. His kingdom will never end." Now, that word kingdom alone would have thrown her off. Because you see, she was a teenage girl living in a town that her country was occupied by another kingdom. She heard of the other kingdoms that used to occupy that country. And yet those kingdoms came and gone, another kingdom came and gone, and another one came and gone. And this angel says to her, "Your son will have a kingdom that will never end." Look at verse 34. "How will this be?" Mary asked the angel, "since I'm a virgin." And then according to Luke, who is writing in a language that Mary and the angels didn't speak, Luke chooses words that are difficult. And many preachers normally tend to skip this part because they don't quite get it. They get a bit weird about it. But she asked a question that any girl would ask. I mean, you're going to have a baby while you're remaining a virgin? I might not be getting full marks in biology, but that normally doesn't happen. So very delicately the angel answers in verse 35. The angel answers, "The Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God." And let's do a quick survey. Before you came here today, how many of you have heard the phrase Son of God associated with the name of Jesus? Okay, how many of you? About half of you? Okay. You know how blasphemous that phrase must have sounded to a Jewish teenage girl? Your son will be called the Son of God. You know how blasphemous that phrase was in the time of Mary. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age. And she who was said to be unable to conceive in the 6th month, for no word from God will ever fail. Here is what we can't understand in the story. There was more than 400 silent years prior to this particular scripture that we're coming to. The Jews were not hearing from God in any prophetic word. In other words, angels didn't come and visit anymore. Prophets stopped talking to the people about what God was going to say. It was known as the silent years after Malachi, when God says through Malachi that your offering are like a strangers to my nostril. There was silence from God. God had enough. I mean, there was this Babylon Empire, and everyone thought it was going to be forever. And the Babylonians, they were brutal, they were rude, just did not care about the Jews and their religion. And yet it didn't last forever. And the Persian Empire came, and they lasted about 400 years. And everyone thought, okay, well, they had a little bit more freedom with the Persian. As long as you did what you were told to do, then you were all right. But then the Persian Empire was destroyed, and this guy, quite a short-looking guy, Alexander the Great, came along. And what he did was he just brought in a language, and he allowed everyone to be able to speak that language. And he brought in the ability to write things down, and everyone was sort of educated. And everyone thought, okay, well, that's great. And again, Alexander, if you did what he told you to do, then you were around. But then the Greek Empire was destroyed, and then Rome came. We all know about Rome. We know a lot about how the Romans did things. And when Mary was living in the midst of her life, everyone thought that Rome was going to be there forever. And this angel says to her, no, your son will have a kingdom, and his kingdom will be forever. It's like God shows up in history, and he says, don't you understand? This isn't about the plan of man and the randomness of man's life. It's about the will of God. And this will transpire, and every one of these kingdoms and empires came and went, and the Lord is declaring his kingdom now. And while you look at the detail and you look at the history, you might not it might not seem to you that the hand of God is in it. And while you look at your life, you might look, where is God in all of this? This was the plan, not this. So what is God doing? Life is not random. And he says, I am the God of purpose, and everything happens according to my will. But then Mary's life got back to normal. In fact, her life got back to a subnormal because the angel went away. And from what Luke discovers, that the angel never showed up to Mary again. And I bet she wanted him to come back, because all of a sudden her life became complicated, because she became a teenage pregnant girl. And that was not in her plan, was it? That was not supposed to happen like that. She heard the words of the angels, but now she's a pregnant teenage girl with no explanation. And I'm sure Mary wanted the angel to explain to other people what happened, to explain to those of what happened as they started calculating and doing the maths in their mind of, wait a minute, are you pregnant, but you haven't been married? You're not married yet? And then she tells Joseph. But he had heads up about it. And when they talked about the bad times, because Caesar tells everyone they have to go home and register for a census. And Joseph tells Mary, I got bad news and really bad news. The bad news is you need to go with me to Bethlehem. And the really bad news is that you will have to ride a donkey. Okay? And now misfavored by God, that woman who is highly favored, which the angel calls her twice, all of a sudden this teenage pregnant girl has to go on a donkey ride. It wasn't in a plan. How many pregnant women would just love to ride on a donkey? Have you ever ridden a donkey before? It's not pleasant. It's very bumpy. And believe you me, even if you were not pregnant, you wouldn't want to ride a donkey. It wasn't a plan, but it was there. And to get there, and she had to ride a donkey to get her there, and it took a long time to get there. You know the story. Remember this part of the story as she rides on a donkey? And not only that, but as she rides on a donkey, they eventually come back after the census. They come back and they're looking for a place to stay. She is very, very pregnant, and there was no room. Was that a part of the plan? There was no room. There was no room in the inn. What happened to Mrs. Favored by God? What happened to remember the Son of God? His kingdom will reign forever. Angel told her that it was going to happen. And I wonder if she looked at Joseph and she said, didn't you reserve a room? Didn't you book ahead of time? Did you forget to do that? And her story becomes worse and worse. And it wasn't a part of the plan that there was no room. And she doesn't know quite where to put that in this randomness of life. And you can imagine how she felt that there was no room. And as you think that will be the end, then Herod hears about this prophecy. And we come to the tragic part of the Christmas story that we tend to sort of forget about it. But we can't pause and think about for very long because it's so sad, it's so bad that it might destroy the romance and the beauty that is always associated with the Christmas story. Because early one morning after Herod heard about this, early one morning the soldiers came. And it wasn't a part of the story. It shouldn't have happened a part of the story. Certainly Mary didn't think that it was going to happen. But the soldiers slaughtered every single child 2 years and older. 2 years and younger. And for the rest of Mary's life, knowing that God saved her little baby, God did nothing to rescue the other little children. What's the purpose of that? I wonder if she asked herself. What's the point in that? God, could you not just kill Herod? Was there no way around this, the soldiers slaughtering the children? And so they fled to Egypt. And you could ask the question again, why? How does this fit in here? It was not a part of the plan, but it was here. And how does it fit in here? Why did it even happen? And years would go by and Mary would experience the most unimaginable pain and sorrow that any mother could have experienced. And she stood outside the courtyard and heard her firstborn son beaten to death. And she saw everything. She saw everything with her own eyes. The one who was to be the Savior of the world. The one who was promised to her. The one that his kingdom will rule forever was now crucified before her. How on earth does that fit in here? Did not God say, you are highly favored, you will call your son Jesus and he will rule and his kingdom will be forever? How on earth do you explain crucifixion? As she looked and she watched, and yes, we know that it all worked out and we romanticize it on Easter time, but she watched it. Miss highly favored with God, and his kingdom shall reign forever, was watching him being crucified and beaten and dying on the most cruelest way possible. And in the moment, it was just another random act of a Roman violence with no good in sight. Has God lost control? No. This was the very epicenter of God's activity. The cross was in the shadow of the cradle. Jesus was born so that he would die. The very moment that it looked like everything was lost was the cross of God's greatest involvement that the world has ever seen. His Son took the sins of the world and the sins of mankind. The things in you that wants order, the things in you that wants purpose, the things in us that wants everything to just come together nicely. That is the thumbprint of God. And on the we are reminded that even when it seems like it's random, even when it seems like there is no purpose, even when it seems to have no good in this, even when it seems that this is an unredeemable illness, death, divorce, joblessness, the top line and the bottom line of Christmas, we are reminded that God is with us. That God is with us. And that things in you that loves it when a plan comes together is confirmed in Christmas. About 25 years later, the Apostle Paul will look back at all of this and he will write a letter, and one of those letters to the Christians in Ephesus, he wrote in chapter 1 of Ephesians, verse 11, and he says, "In him we are chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of him who works out everything. And everything in Greek means everything. In conformity with the purpose." Here's that word again. The purpose of his will. Perfect will. And when the angel of the Lord finished with Mary, she did not know the story that we know. She did not know how it was all going to work out. So at the end of the conversation with the angel, she said what I hope you can also say. And in verse 38 of Luke chapter 1, she says to the angel, unknowing what all of this was going to be, she says, "I am the Lord's servant. May it be done to me according to your word." You know that is an amazing thing that she says. And you know what I take away from this? I don't know how faith has been defining for you in your life. Maybe you've been taught that faith moves God. And I believe that the perfect faith is not faith that moves God, but rather that perfect faith is the faith that moves us to trust God when He does seems to be moving. Perfect faith is a faith that says, yes, I might not understand, but I will engage with you on this plan. Yes, I might have got married just like I planned, but then life handed me something that was not planned. Divorce or illness or death or joblessness. And I didn't plan for that. And my desire isn't to move God back into the plan of life, but rather trust God in spite of the fact that life isn't moving according to my plan. You see, perfect faith is what Mary says, I am the Lord's servant, may it be to me according to your word. Here's the good news. Here's the top line, the bottom line of Christmas. Regardless of what life hands to you, regardless of what you are experiencing, the things in you that wants the plan to come together, the purpose, to know the plan of God, regardless of that, everything fits perfectly together in His will. So this is how I want to close today. There is another place for another ball, and it has a question mark on it. Okay? And for the past few weeks, for the next few weeks as we approach Christmas, maybe you've been handed something that you were not quite expecting. Maybe you were given something, whatever it is, that you were not quite expecting. And now you look at your life and you wonder, where does this go? Where do I put this? because you didn't plan for it, and it's difficult to trust God with this thing that He's staring you in the face, and you wonder, well, what more? How? Why? I don't know what to do about this, but I want you to be able to pray with Mary. If life has given you another thing, I want you to pray the prayer that Mary prayed. I am the Lord's servant. May it be to me according to your word. I want God to redeem this for good. And I don't want to lose hope just because I can't understand this. Because God did promise that He will restore the years that the locusts have eaten away. And that's you. Then I want you, where you are, to just close your eyes. And just you and the Lord. No one else needs to know your circumstances. And just say, God, give me the perfect faith to trust you with this. And then pray like Mary prayed. Lord, I am your servant. May it be to me according to your word. And then once you place this right here, so that you learn to deal with it as God shows Himself to you and His perfect will for your life. Amen. We're going to stand and sing our last song together, which is a Christmas carol, Joy to the World.